Welcome to our talk today, 10 Essentials for Adventure, what you need to bring on an outdoor adventure and why. Again, my name is Austin Soto. I'm an assistant professor of wilderness leadership and experiential education, and I've been doing outdoor rec as a profession for almost 15 years now, all over the country, and I've been here in the Southeast in upstate South Carolina since 2016. Love it, really excited to be here today to share with you all about how to adventure outside in a way that is safe and smart using the 10 Essentials system. So what our plan is for the day is to talk through these elements. First is to look at the 10 Essentials as a system rather than just individual items. We're going to discuss, and I'm going to show some demos of each of these systems in practice, and then a little bit of a wrap-up. So starting off, just the 10 Essentials system. But first, a quote. This is an adage from the British military, the Army specifically. Proper planning and preparation prevents piss poor performance. Good little alt-E mnemonic. And really, this does serve as kind of the heart of the idea of the 10 Essentials. The 10 Essentials is a system of being prepared in case the worst would happen in the outdoors, whether you're on a day hike, a multi-day canoe trip. These are 10 things that we do not want to forget to bring with us when doing any kind of outdoor adventure so that we can perform well, be safe. And it is really important to think about the 10 Essentials as systems rather than items, because this allows for a certain measure of flexibility and adaptability in what we pack and prepare for our outdoor adventures. You'll see in a second that when the 10 Essentials as a concept was first introduced, it was a list of 10 specific items. And it was that way for a long time. These were the 10 specific things that people wanted to bring on all outdoor adventures. But we've really migrated to an idea of, instead of 10 specific items, 10 essential systems that we plan for and prepare and pack with us, so that we are prepared for any kind of emergency. And that way, you know, how we exactly interpret that system, what exactly we do, may change depending on if we're just doing a day hike, if we're doing a multi-day backpacking trip, if we're doing a really remote river rafting trip over a few weeks long. Thinking of them as systems will help us be more comprehensively prepared. So here you can see on the presentation the original list of the 10 Essentials. We have our map, compass, sunglasses and sunscreen, extra clothing, headlamp and flashlight, first aid supplies, fire starter, matches, knife, and extra food. So that was the original list as it was first introduced. Today though, like I said, we've moved from these 10 specific items to a 10 Essentials system, and you're going to see a lot of similarities because it's still the same principle behind the items, but now it's really about the system that's in place, not about the item itself. So instead of just a map, for example, and bringing one map for the area, we think of the navigation system, which could include a map and a compass, but you can also think of your navigation system as including a GPS device or your phone, and bringing all of those pieces together, or just some of them, but having a well-done set of gear that you've packed as part of that navigation system. And the same for each of these. And we're going to dive into each of them in more detail. But sun protection, you know, it's not just sunglasses, it's the whole system of how we're protecting ourselves from the sun, from getting sunburn. And there can be many things that we can bring in order to fulfill that goal of sun protection and be part of that system. Insulation, the clothing that we're wearing to keep us warm and dry. Illumination, what we need to see by in low light environments. First aid supplies, a system for fire, a system of repair kit and tools, a set of nutrition, some hydration, and then some kind of emergency shelter is now what we're thinking about. So again, instead of just here are the 10 items that I need to toss in my bag, it's thinking here are the 10 systems that I need to think about and account for and bring whatever it is for that specific trip's context to take care of each of these needs and be prepared for these kind of emergencies. So systems, not items. So what are each of these in a little bit more detail? Navigation to the system I already talked about a little bit, but again, I'm going to pull up some of these items certainly some of the things that you can consider is some kind of map for your area. Maps come in a lot of varieties. Some are good, some are not so good. This particular map is a map of the Tortuga Wild and Scenic River, trail guide, and it's great for that specific area. A lot of maps like this are excellent. I don't have a copy of it now, but the gold standard of maps for a lot of more advanced navigation is the United States Geological Survey 7.5-minute topographic map. But it can be sometimes hard to come across those in your local stores. Local stores are much more likely to sell maps like these. You just got to be careful that you're looking for a good quality map with topographic representation so you can see the areas that you're in and the different kind of terrain, and not something that's overly simplistic. Sometimes guidebooks will have maps in them, but they're basically like hand-drawn little images. Those are not maps. You want something that truly has topographic representation. And to go along with that map, often you'll want a compass of some kind. There are a lot of varieties. I have two different examples here, one with and without a sighting mirror. But a basic compass is totally fine, something that points north, south, east, west, and all of the coordinates in between, or the degrees in between, to go along with that map so that you can orient it properly, use it effectively. The sighting mirror is nice because it can help you take better bearings, but not a necessity. Same thing, accounting for declination in your compass, something that's adjustable is really nice, but not a necessity if you know how to use the basic compass and account for those things with the map. It's very powerful. Today though, we do love to use our technology with navigation system. So things like your phone and different kinds of apps, AllTrails, CalTopo, Gaia GPS are all certain examples that you can download maps, you can review them, and I mean even Google Maps though, all those kind of things, we love to use that technology. You can buy a separate GPS system from a company like Garmin, but those are great tools, and I often bring, at least my phone, if not some kind of GPS unit with me. But the one thing about having technology as part of our navigation system as an essential is that technology can fail. And so bringing a map or bringing that compass as that physical hard copy backup, once again, this is 10 essentials are really about being prepared for when the worst happens. That we can survive until help comes, that we can take care of ourselves in an emergency. And so hard copy like a map, a bit more reliable than a piece of technology that can break, that can run out of batteries. But certainly I love bringing my phone, I love bringing a GPS device and using it. So those aren't bad, but just think about having maybe both pieces for that navigation. So if you do bring technology, also consider things like having extra batteries or a power bank. Right here I have a small little power bank that just is good for a couple charges for my phone in case it runs out of batteries when I'm using it for app-based navigation. So having something like that along as well is a great part of that system. In terms of sun protection, the next part of our system, once again, we're not just thinking about like sunscreen or a hat. We're thinking about what are all the pieces and tools that we could potentially use to protect ourselves from the sun. And then whether you use all of them and you pack them all in your bag or you just take a couple of these pieces is going to be context dependent on what kind of trip you're planning, how long it is, where it is, what the activity is you're doing. Are you someplace where you're going to be out for an extended period of time on water in the sun and you can't pack like limitless amounts of sunscreen, and then it's time to think about a sunshade hoodie, something that has long sleeves and maybe a hood that we can put up so that we don't have to put sunscreen on. We can be protected by the clothing that we're wearing. But a lot of good things that we're thinking about. Sunglasses right here that have protection from UVA and UVB rays to protect our eyes. If you're on water, I also like to say polarized sunglasses for reducing glare. That's not so much of a safety issue always, but a convenience issue. Sunscreen, I often just have in like a little day pack, a little backup small sunscreen, but this can get bigger depending on how long of a trip you're planning and how much sunscreen you're having out. With a high SPF rating of at least 30, has been pretty consistently recommended as the lowest you want to go for adequate sun protection. And again, whether you just have a little bit of an extra supply in case you're stuck out somewhere on a day hike longer than you expect, exposed to the sun longer than you expect, or you're bringing more of this, is going to depend on the context of your trip. That's why we think of it as systems and not just, I have some sunscreen, I'm good to go. So sunscreen, lip balm that has SPF in it as well to protect our lips. I didn't bring a hat with me today, but lots of hats out there. Wide brims that go full 360 around your head are the best, or ones that have neck coverings are great for sun protection. I wore for enough years that I actually had the brim detached from a hat that had a neck cover flap. I looked really kind of silly wearing it, but it provided a lot of great sun protection. And I didn't like wearing sunscreen, so I really loved wearing that hat instead, and that's why now it's broken. But that hat, and then again, those long sleeve clothing items, interestingly, like people often think that like when it's hot out, I want to wear short sleeves and shorts to keep cool, and there is some logic to that, but when in terms of sun protection, long pants and long sleeves are going to actually be better for you. The key to make that comfortable though is to buy fabrics that are lightweight and breathable. So I'm not bringing my like heavy jeans out when I'm hiking, or a particularly thick cotton shirt. You know, I'm something that's really light, very easy to breathe, quick to dry, so that I'm getting that physical sun protection, but I'm not overheating because I'm in longer sleeves or in longer pants compared to shorts. And maybe that's the kind of thing that like you could wear on an outdoor trip, like you come out in a t-shirt, but if you notice that you're out for longer or you're starting to get sunburned, you maybe have that sun hoodie or that long sleeve in your backpack that you can just throw it on for that additional protection if you need it. So sun protection as a system. Also the idea of clothing, so we're talking a little bit about clothing for sun protection, but one of the other essential systems that we want to think about for keeping ourselves safe in an emergency when we have to be out longer than we planned for is clothing that insulates us from the elements, whether that's the cold or the rain. In all seasons of weather, whether it's hot, cold, mild, I will always have a rain jacket of some kind that is in my backpack. Sometimes if I'm in a particularly wet environment or a lot of rain is predicted, I might even have a similar item, rain pants for my lower half, but minimum the jacket for that protection from the rain, something that's waterproof, it's breathable. If you're on a budget, you can consider having an emergency poncho or something instead. They don't breathe particularly well, so you can get very sweaty in them, and you get wet anyway from sweat instead of rain. But a nice waterproof breathable jacket can take you really far, and it's great to have. And staying wet staying dry keeps you warm, so we want to have that rain protection, that wind protection as well. But then as part of insulation, some kind of jacket. This is a synthetic puffy jacket, but a fleece would do well, a down jacket. Just anything that adds that layer of warmth to us. In the wilderness and an outdoor adventure, we often talk about planning our clothing in terms of layers. So it's not just that I pack, one jacket for all purposes, but that I'm packing a couple different layers to serve different purposes, and that I can manage my temperature accordingly. When it's really cold in the morning, I have this layer on. Then when it warms up in the afternoon, I can take it off. If it's unexpectedly cold night, I can put it back on. I don't always want to wear my rain jacket just when it's raining. And that's what that acronym, we use the acronym WISE, which stands for our wicking layer. So we're thinking about that base layer shirt that's quick to dry and is just comfortable to wear. So like athletic clothing is what we're thinking of here. That you might wear like when playing, a field sport. but also natural fibers like wool can be really excellent for that wicking layer. That I, that insulating layer, so that puffy jacket, that fleece for keeping us warm. S is for shell, that's that rain jacket to protect us from the water, but also from the wind. And then E is our extras that we're thinking about. Do I want to bring that hat or that set of gloves, that beanie, to help keep me warm as well? That extra pair of socks in case they get wet, doing a creek crossing while hiking or something. All of these are what we consider. And again, as a system that considers insulation, I'm not packing the same set of clothes for every single trip I come out, with the exception of maybe the rain jacket, just because you never know when it's going to rain. But like, I'm not packing, right now it's summer here in South Carolina, I'm not packing that synthetic puffy jacket with me on my hike. I know I'm not going to need it. But as the temperature turns, even in the early fall or in the late spring, when you have those shoulder seasons, and maybe most of the days are hot, but I'm never 100% sure that it might not have a big storm that comes through and drops the temperature or gets really cold, I'm probably going to pack that jacket, even if it's only 1% of the time that I'm going to need it. I want that resource, that one insulation layer, just in case. You want to pack beyond the minimum. Not necessarily always imagining that the worst could happen, but the almost worst. We're not going to pack 10 layers of clothing as backups. We'll pack 1 or 2 and have those in our bag. They don't weigh very much, so we want to have those resources on us to keep us warm, keep us dry. The system of illumination. So things to help us see in the dark at night. Most people these days, when they're doing outdoor adventures, they'll buy and use a headlamp of some kind. And the main reason for this is because I can be hands-free when I wear the headlamp, so I'm able to do things even as I'm working by the light. If I have a flashlight, that limits me. I have to hold it with one hand, I have to put it in my mouth. And that's just a convenience factor that is often pretty important. If I'm in an emergency or I need to do things, I want both my hands. So that headlamp as your source of illumination is really important. Even if you're not planning, you're planning a day hike and you're like, I'm not going to be out at night. I'm going to come back home at 1 p.m. or 11 a.m. This should still be in your day hiking bag, because if you get lost, if you get hurt, and instead of that 3-hour hike, it's a 24-hour evacuation. Have that light source with you, ready to go. But if it's a short hike, I might just bring the headlamp. But if I'm doing a longer trip, I'm going to bring a light source. But now I'm also going to bring extra batteries for that light source, or maybe it's even a secondary light source that's smaller, maybe a pen light or something, so that I have some backup over that long term for illumination. So, a lantern, if you're doing more of a car camping trip, and you could have that resource, though they do make some pretty small electric lanterns for hanging in tents and stuff. Any of those kind of things. But we want to be able to see in the dark on our outdoor adventures and when things are going wrong. So illumination is going to be huge for us. Some context, you're bringing even additional illumination. For example, if you're going caving as your outdoor adventure of choice, it's not enough to just have 1 or even 2 sources of light. You're talking 3 or 4 different sources of light, plus extra batteries to go along with it. So again, that's why we think not in terms of, I just brought a flashlight and I've checked it off my list, that's my essential. It's, I'm bringing illumination that's appropriate for the adventure that I want to have, and for the things that could potentially go wrong while on that adventure. When we're out in the outdoors having fun and doing cool things, hiking, climbing, paddling, big or small, people get hurt, terrain's uneven, storms come up, all kinds of things can happen. So it's incredibly important to have some set of first aid supplies on every outdoor adventure that you go on. Absolutely essential. That first aid kit should be tailored to the needs of your particular trip, which are going to be influenced by things like your group size, the length of your trip, any specific medical conditions that group members have. You know, they might have their own prescription medications that they need to bring, and those are all going to influence how much I need to bring. You know, I have, for example, 2 different first aid kits right here. This is a smaller first aid kit that actually lives in my car year round, but this is what I'll typically toss in my backpack for a day hike. It's pretty simple, doesn't have too many medical supplies, pretty lightweight. But this would not be the first aid supplies that I would want to bring for a longer backpacking trip or river trip. I'm going to start to increase the size of my first aid kit. You can see, I'll put it back up, that this is a little bit bigger. This is about maybe another third big than compared to this one. I can carry more stuff, have a little bit more advanced first aid supplies. And that's going to be really important for those longer expeditions or expeditions with more people where I could need more supplies. But you can even think about other things that are context dependent, like if I'm on a river trip and I want to bring a set of first aid supplies, I'm not going to bring it in a bag like those that I have. I'm going to probably pack those first aid supplies into a dry bag or a waterproof bag of some kind to keep them safe from going underwater while on the river if my boat flips or something. And so again, it's like we're not just thinking when we're planning with the 10 essentials about, I've just checked off the list, I brought the thing that's on the list, but like, does what I need, am I actually bringing that for the context I'm in? Am I building the right system to cover myself and my group in emergencies? First aid supplies, and you're thinking things like bandages, wound cleaning, antiseptics, blister treatment, pain relievers, personal medications, tools like trauma shears, thermometers, tweezers. There's lots and lots of first aid supplies out there that you can consider. Lots of companies make pre-made first aid kits that you can buy. And it's often a good choice for your first time getting a first aid kit for an outdoor adventure, but as you gain more experience, you can begin to customize that first aid kit to your needs and do that for each trip that you plan. So first aid supplies as an essential. Moving on, we're thinking about a system for fire. You know, in an emergency, fire can be incredibly important. You know, it serves as a source of heat, a source of light. It serves as an ability to, in a way, to signal for help through smoke. There are a lot of reasons that we want to build a fire in an emergency, and so we want to have as part of our emergency essentials kit ways to make that fire. You know, there are a lot of places that we adventure that fires aren't allowed, and you know, you go on a backpacking trip and you can only use a stove, but even in those areas you still want to have some of these fire system supplies, not to use to build a fire for recreation and enjoyment or for cooking a meal just for fun, but for that emergency situation when, you know, the stove stops working, or you lose some of your equipment to a bear, or you're just out for longer and you run out of fuel, and then you need that fire for some reason, or you need it to build that signal, or to keep warm, or to help someone, you know, prevent hypothermia. Those are the kind of things. So even in places where fires are not allowed for the normal course of operations, we're still going to bring a set system for starting fires, for risk management purposes. And things that we can consider as part of that fire system are going to be waterproof matches in a waterproof case. So I have here a small case. There's a little bit of some cotton kindling, the matches in here. There's a striker on the outside of this little container. But I also love to bring just like a pretty basic lighter in addition to the matches. Kind of similar to with our headlamps where you might consider 2 different sources of illumination. I like having 2 different sources of fire in my emergency kit, and especially because it's so light, so small to pack. Why not? Why not? But so yeah, those waterproof matches, the lighter, some kind of kindling can be really helpful. You know, sometimes the time you need a fire is the time during a rainstorm or just after one when everything is wet and it's impossible to get one started with the natural material around us. So whether it's like some cotton or some dryer lint, or there's several different options that you can use to have some kind of fire starter to assist in that process. Have some of that tinder with you. And you can even consider going to some more rustic skills like flint and steel as a fire starter in addition to matches or a lighter. But those can require a bit of a skill set to use more effectively. So if you don't have that skill set, I would stick to those matches or that lighter for this system. Do think about, as part of a fire system, the idea of having a stove and extra fuel, or like an extra stove. This is a bit of a luxury, but you know, a lot of times on like longer expedition backpacking trips, I might have a large stove system for the group cooking, and I might have a very tiny micro stove that really is, they sell them, they're almost the exact same size as this little match container these days. And I might have that and a single can of fuel as a backup stove as part of my system. One of the classic things everyone thinks about when they think about having a tool for the outdoors is some kind of knife or multi-tool, and there are hundreds of options out there. I have just a couple with me. Pretty classic multi-tool with the pliers that slides out, different tools that are inside, knife, screwdriver, can opener, all those kind of things. And I have one in my pocket that's a little bit more basic, that just has a pliers and a couple screwdrivers and a knife. And there are ones that are way, way bigger and more dense, but obviously, you know, these are emergency supplies a lot of times, things that we maybe aren't going to necessarily use on a daily basis on our adventure. So I still want something to do repairs or to help in an emergency, but I don't want to pack the biggest knife I can find or the biggest multi-tool I find. There's a balance between weight, space, and functionality that we're striving for in this kind of equipment. Now, of course, a lot of times people do have an everyday use in an outdoor adventure for a knife, like maybe they're using it as part of their cooking equipment or something, and you're using your multi-tool for that, and that's great. Then it can serve both as your everyday piece of gear and your emergency piece of gear for doing repairs and stuff like that. But that reliable multi-tool or knife is super important. But alone, it's often not enough. We have to carry several different pieces of supplies to make a good repair kit. This is a recently made repair kit by me. It's just a random stuff sack that I've filled with supplies. And again, like what you have in a bag like this for your repair kit is going to change depending on what kind of trip that you need and how much of something you could expect to use. On a hiking trip, I'm going to have duct tape in this kind of a kit, and I'll have a decent amount, but on a paddling trip, I might bring even more because duct tape is one of the few things that you can even try to use to repair a crack in a boat, in a canoe or a kayak, you know, if you hit a rock. And so I might have even more for that kind of trip. So I'm always thinking, like, I'm not just packing the same repair kit every time, but I'm considering what are the potential emergencies I might face, what are the types of gear I might need to fix. You know, so for example, this is a stove repair kit for my backpacking stove. If I had a different kind of stove or I was cooking with just fires or something, I would not have this in my kit. It wouldn't be needed as an essential. I have some repair tape for patching sleeping bags or tents, some parachute cord for all kinds of different repairs and lashing things together. A small sewing kit is in this repair kit as well. Some different buckles and straps for lashing or fixing a backpack. A tent pole repair sleeve for camping. You know, but if I was on a day hike and I didn't have a tent, I'm not going to have a repair kit that has a tent repair pull sleeve in it because I don't have anything to use that for. Or if I'm camping with a hammock, I don't need that pole sleeve because hammock camping, there's no poles. So again, like I'm building my repair system and my kit and my tools based on the needs and the potential emergencies of the trip that I'm going to have, and what I might encounter when things go wrong. So some batteries, and here's some of my duct tape right here. So things that you can consider having, but you may change it based on what specific kind of adventure you're out for the day. The next couple are going to be there for any kind of outdoor trip, whether it's climbing, hiking, paddling, skiing, is having some extra nutrition. All activities that we do in the outdoors are going to require calories from us. Our body's going to be burning things to move and to keep warm. And we want to have more food than we think we just need to survive. So I will have, like, when I do a day hike, I will pack like my lunch for the day. And that's what I've planned just for my meal. That should cover me. But then I'm also going to have several snacks and like little bars, or some gummies that I don't really plan on eating as part of my normal lunch meal for my day hike out, but that are there in case I spend a night out in an emergency and I need a little bit of extra fuel to help keep me warm and going. Or if for some reason like I get hurt and I'm expending more energy now to get back at a slower pace, and I'm eating through my food, I'm packing a little bit more. So right here, this bag of snacks literally just like lives in my day pack a lot of times, and I never plan to use it, but I have it in case I need more food than the lunch or the dinner or whatever it is that I've planned for. What you'll find that's really good for planning your nutrition system, since again this is stuff that's backup, you don't want to have really bulky items or things that are like super heavy. So things that are calorically dense, like energy bars, nuts, those are all going to be great. You can consider on like a multi-day trip having something like an extra freeze-dried meal, like a pre-packaged one that like, hey, we've eaten all of our dinners for the week and someone is still super hungry or we're going to be out another night, that you could pack something light, like one of those pre-made freeze-dried meals. Probably wouldn't do that for a day hike. I would stick to like some snack bars, maybe some peanut butter, things like that are calorically dense but not super heavy. And I'm going to pack beyond the minimum. I'm going to have my meal plan for whatever the adventure is that I'm doing, and then I'm going to have my little set of emergency supplies for if someone's really extra hungry or if we're out for an extra day and need a little bit more to keep us going. I want to keep calories in my body to stay warm, to stay healthy, to keep going until the adventure's done and everyone's back home safe. So nutrition is super important as part of our essential system. And then to go right along with nutrition, hydration. We need water even more than we need food in an emergency. And so we want to have a system in place that will help us provide that need. It can be as simple as just having some extra small bottle of water purification. You could have a small bottle like this that contains some bleach or some iodine for water purification that serves as your backup. A lot of times on a backpacking trip, I will have a filtration system of some kind, but I will also carry a tiny bottle of a chemical water purifier that I store separately in a different location, just in case I need it on a day hike where I don't plan to have a need for purifying water. I'm just going to drink out of the water bottle or the water hydration bladder that I brought. But if something goes wrong, this is very lightweight to have a small bit of chemical filtration. You can also find iodine tablets that are extremely lightweight and packable. But some kind of backup supply for purifying water. Something I've adopted recently for a lot of day hikes is a water bottle that has a built-in filtration system in it, so that it serves both as the water I initially take out and also the water that I can purify for more. And that has been super handy for just like when I'm out for a day fly fishing on the river, and I run out of water for my initial fill up, I can just scoop right down and then purify the next set of water. And it doesn't add a ton of weight because it's already my water bottle and my purifier. So there are a lot of different ways that you can think about a hydration system, but you want to have enough water that's sufficient for your trip. For the average day hike, you're looking at 2 to 3 liters of water per person per day. And then the ability to make extra with some kind of purifier in addition to what you initially pack from home. Or if you're in a location where there's not a lot of readily available water sources, maybe a desert environment, you start thinking about actually packing literal extra water from home. So rather than just those 2 or 3 liters that I would normally take for a day hike, I might now pack a gallon or a gallon and a half, so that I have extra water in that case of that emergency, just in case I'm out longer than I expect. And yes, that's going to be heavier, but I would much prefer to have a little bit of heavier weight on my bag on that desert day hike than to run out of water in a really hot environment, really dry environment, and need it when I'm out longer than I need to. But again, a lot of different ways that you can think about purifying water if you do have access to it in the outdoors. Chemical filtration, mechanical filtration, UV filtration. Do research on all the different products that are out there and choose the one that fits your needs the best. But make sure that you will have access to water throughout a time of things going wrong or things going longer than they need to. And then emergency shelter. A lot of times when things don't go according to plan, especially on a day trip, that means that a day trip is turned into an overnight trip. And we want to have some pieces of equipment in our bag that will prepare us for being out overnight and being sheltered. This does not mean that you need to pack an entire tent with you, though there are some tent products that are extremely packable and small that someone might consider, or at least a very ultralight tarp. But honestly, a lot of times what I do for an emergency shelter for a day trip is I kind of double up and just use a really basic emergency blanket. And I can use this as, a wrap around my body. But I can also set it up more like a tarp if I really needed to. And so these can be kind of versatile, just a very thin, lightweight, you can see this is almost nothing, piece of metallic fabric that helps reflect heat, but also doesn't let water through. And so whether it's as simple as an emergency blanket, all the way to I have an ultralight version of a tent or a tarp that I can set up. Some kind of shelter that if you find yourself out for longer than you plan on being, that you can set it up. Even setting it up just means I've laid it across my body and wrapped myself in it. Setting up doesn't have to mean I've set up a shelter between trees and made it really fancy, but something that will reflect heat, insulate heat, and keep water off of you for a long time, so that you can stay, if not like perfectly comfortable, you can stay comfortable enough to survive for a while, regardless of the conditions, by having a kind of basic shelter, or to get you through for a moment until you can build perhaps a more substantial shelter if you're going to be out for a long, long period of time. So a lot of options, depending on our needs. But I really like that lightweight, just emergency blanket for most scenarios. Now, those are the end of the 10 essential systems, as they're kind of published and well known these days in the outdoor adventure world. But there are certain things that I think bear considering as part of your emergency backup system, as part of your planning for any adventure trip, that while not officially part of any of those systems are still incredibly important to consider bringing in some form or fashion. One of those being a communication device. Sometimes this is right in line with your map and your navigation system, because a lot of people, if they use their phone, that's also their communication device and their navigation device. Or if they use a GPS unit, that unit is both their navigation device and often has some kind of emergency locator beacon built into it that can be used to send emergency communications and navigate. So sometimes those go together, but you can also consider like a satellite phone for very remote locations or long remote wilderness trips, or something that serves as just a personal locator beacon of some kind. Sometimes in some places two-way radios can be really great if you have multiple groups who are all traveling together, but maybe on like slightly different trail systems or something, or kind of staggered, can be really awesome. So but that communication device, that ability to call, to text, to reach out and get help, whether it's from deep in the wilderness or from at least like back in the trailhead, or somewhere you can get service. A lot of different options for that communication. And again, a lot of times communication device is the same as our navigation device because we have that phone or that GPS personal locator beacon combo, which is great. Whistling, if anyone has tried to yell for a really long period of time, whether it was at a sports game, something that you were really excited and cheering for people, you may have come back from a concert, notice that your throat is really raw and your voice is really hard to hear. And that is why we really like to recommend whistles as part of something we bring as an emergency gear in the outdoors, so that if I need to call for attention from other people to make a sound, I can whistle with a whistle for a lot longer than I can yell without losing my voice. So just any kind of basic, whistle will do. And some places it's actually a legal requirement. You go paddling in a lot of locations, kayaking on a lake or something, it's going to be a legal requirement to have a whistle on your PFD, a noise-making device, with you at all times. But even in places that it's not a legal requirement, consider that noisemaker, that whistle, so that if you do need to call for attention to a search and rescue party, you can blow that whistle for a long time compared to yelling out and losing your voice. You can also consider things like a small signal mirror. That's one of the great things about buying a compass, going back to our navigation, with a sighting mirror, is this also can double as a signaling mirror for reflecting light towards like aerial rescue. But we want that signal option. Also super important, personal items, identification, a little bit of extra money, copies of your permits, both on your person, but also ones that you've left at home or at the trailhead in a registry. These different things that can just help us in an emergency, like perhaps you went on a day hike and you ended up unconscious. You're a diabetic and you had a diabetic emergency. Having some of those personal items, a medical ID bracelet, that medical ID that's filled out on your phone. A lot of people have the ability to see medical information without getting through the lock screen. Make sure that that's filled out on your phone. So in those cases that like someone comes along and you can't tell them what's wrong with you or who you are, there are resources on your person that will let that emergency responder or that first responder know, hey, this is who that person is, and here's some of their medical history that I can know about. And then of course it's always good to have things like money, so that when if you do get lost and you find your way to help or to get a ride, you can pay for something, you can buy something as needed. And then I don't know why it's really not essential, maybe because not everywhere, every season, we always need it, but insect repellent. I would say that it is an 11th essential for sure if you are in a season and a place where bugs are really prevalent. Here in the southeast, in the summers, we're going to have a lot of kinds of bugs that bite and give you a bad reaction. And That is super unpleasant, sometimes even deadly for someone who has a severe allergy. And so having that insect repellent in those places and times is, I think, an essential item to bring with us to prevent us from getting those stings, getting those bites. And having a little bit of extra is going to be huge in making life better, more enjoyable, and keeping us safe for a while. And so those items, they're not technically part of those 10 essential systems. They may very well be essential for you when you're out doing an adventure for the emergency preparedness of your trip. And I think there could be even more examples than those 4 that I listed. Again, I think that's one of the key ideas of the switch that was made from the 10 essential items for outdoor adventure to the 10 essential systems, is it's this message and this principle of critically think about the things that could happen and plan accordingly and be prepared accordingly. Don't just make a list and then just blindly follow it every time for every scenario, because that list isn't always going to apply or always be needed, whether it's because you're packing too much or because you're packing too little and not enough. So it's really about, like, this idea of essential systems for adventure is about a starting point in your planning, and then thinking critically from there about your needs, what could go wrong, your risk management, and tailoring your essentials kit to that, the specific demands of your adventure, who you're going with, when you're going, what kind of weather you might face, and all the other things that could come into play while you're out. Again, as a reminder, proper planning and preparation prevents piss poor performance, our British Army adage. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed learning a little bit more about the 10 essentials, and this has helped you to be able to think critically about your own outdoor adventures and what you need to pack and plan for anytime you get outside, so that you can be safe and that you can get home. Thank you very much. Have a great evening.